You were never abandoned by the storm, never forgotten in the night, never misplaced in the long chapter of pain that seemed to stretch endlessly before you, because the suffering you endured was not a punishment but a signal, a sacred knock on the door of your becoming, a whisper from destiny saying, "Pay attention, chosen one, something powerful is being formed within you." You did not stumble into hardship by accident, you were guided there by purpose, shaped by resistance, strengthened by the very weight that tried to break your spirit. And even when you questioned why your path seemed heavier than others, why your tears fell more often, why your heart carried wounds that no one else could see, the truth was quietly unfolding. You were being prepared for a rise that required depth, compassion, wisdom, and an unshakable understanding of the human soul. The fire did not come to destroy you. It came to reveal you, to burn away what could not travel with you into the future you were destined to claim. And every sleepless night, every silent prayer, every moment of loneliness was shaping your voice, your strength, your ability to stand tall not only for yourself but for others who would one day look to you and say, "If they survived that, so can I." There were seasons when the world felt cold, when love seemed distant, when doors closed without explanation and people walked away without apology, leaving you to sit with questions that had no immediate answers. Yet even then, something sacred was happening beneath the surface, because chosen ones are often isolated before they are elevated, separated before they are celebrated, misunderstood before they are recognized, and it is in that quiet, aching space that you learned how to listen to your own heartbeat, how to trust your intuition, how to stand alone without collapsing into bitterness. You learned that pain can either harden you or humble you, and you chose, even when it hurt, to remain tender, to keep believing in light, to keep your spirit open in a world that tried to convince you to close it off. And that choice, that courage to remain soft in a hard place, is the mark of someone meant to rise with grace rather than vengeance. You did not suffer because you were weak. You suffered because you were strong enough to carry what others could not, because your soul had the capacity to transform pain into purpose, wounds into wisdom, and tears into testimony. There were days when you felt like you were drowning, when hope seemed like a distant shore you could barely see, yet somehow, something within you kept moving, kept breathing, kept whispering, "This is not the end." And that whisper was not imagination. It was destiny reminding you that your story was still unfolding, that the chapter you were in was heavy because it was meaningful, that the pressure you felt was shaping diamonds, not dust. You were learning resilience not from books or speeches, but from lived experience, from the raw curriculum of survival, and that education gave you a depth no easy life ever could. Every time you were knocked down and chose to stand again, even with trembling legs, you were rewriting the narrative of your life, teaching the universe how seriously you took your own becoming. Every time you were betrayed and still chose integrity, every time you were overlooked and still chose excellence, every time you were doubted and still chose to believe in yourself, you were signaling to the world that you were not defined by circumstance but by character. The suffering sharpened your discernment, taught you to see beyond appearances, to recognize truth even when it wore a disguise, and that awareness is a gift reserved for those who have walked through darkness and learned how to find their own light. You may not have understood it then, but the delays were protecting you, the setbacks were redirecting you, and the disappointments were clearing space for something greater than what you were holding on to. What felt like loss was often liberation, what felt like rejection was often redirection, and what felt like silence was often preparation. You were being trained to trust the unseen, to move forward without applause, to build strength without validation, and that kind of faith, the kind that persists even when there is no evidence, is the foundation of every true rise. You were learning how to be rooted rather than rushed, grounded rather than desperate, patient rather than panicked, and those qualities would later become the pillars that held you steady when success arrived. The chosen one's path is rarely smooth, because smooth paths do not build endurance, they do not teach empathy, they do not cultivate the kind of wisdom that can change lives. You were given challenges that stretched your heart and tested your resolve, because your future required someone who could stand in complexity without losing compassion, someone who could lead with humility rather than ego, someone who could uplift others without needing to dominate them. The pain taught you how to listen, how to hold space, how to understand suffering without judgment, and those lessons transformed you into someone capable of making a difference beyond your own survival. There were moments when you wanted to quit, when the weight felt unbearable, when you wondered if all your effort was in vain. Yet even in those moments, you showed up, you breathed through the pain, you took one more step, and that persistence, quiet and uncelebrated, was planting seeds that would later bloom in ways you could not yet imagine. You did not need to be perfect to be powerful. You needed to be present, honest, and willing to keep going. And that willingness carried you through storms that would have broken a lesser spirit. Now, as you stand on the threshold of your becoming, you can begin to see that nothing was wasted, that every tear watered the soil of your growth, that every struggle carved space within you for greater joy, deeper love, and more meaningful purpose. You can feel the strength in your voice, the steadiness in your steps, the clarity in your vision, and you realize that the suffering was not a detour but the path itself, leading you toward a version of yourself that is resilient, compassionate, and unafraid to rise. You are no longer waiting for permission to shine, no longer asking the world to validate your worth, because you have already proven to yourself that you can survive, adapt, and transform. This is the moment to stand tall, to honor the journey that shaped you, to claim the wisdom you earned through experience, and to move forward with courage and intention. You are not here by accident. You are here because the world needs what you carry, needs the perspective forged in fire, needs the empathy born of pain, needs the hope that only someone who has walked through darkness can offer. Your rise is not about leaving others behind. It is about lifting them up, about showing what is possible when resilience meets purpose, when faith meets action, when pain meets meaning. So step into your calling with confidence, knowing that every challenge prepared you, every setback refined you, every moment of doubt strengthened your resolve. Let your story be a beacon, your life a testament, your presence a reminder that suffering does not have the final word, that adversity can be transformed into ascent, and that those who endure with grace are often the ones who rise the highest. You are the chosen one not because you were spared hardship, but because you were shaped by it, and now, with a heart full of wisdom and a spirit unbroken, you are ready to rise, not in spite of what you endured, but because of it. And as you continue forward, you begin to understand that rising does not mean the absence of fear. It means the courage to move while fear still whispers in your ear. It means choosing faith when doubt tries to sit beside you. It means trusting the strength you earned in silence more than the noise of the world around you. You are not the same person who once cried themselves to sleep wondering if tomorrow would ever feel lighter. Because now you carry the proof in your bones that you can survive the night and still greet the morning with hope in your eyes. The scars you once tried to hide have become markings of honor, reminders that you endured, that you stayed, that you did not abandon yourself even when others did, and there is a quiet confidence that grows from that kind of loyalty to your own soul. You start to see how your presence alone shifts rooms, how your words carry weight not because they are loud but because they are true, how people listen when you speak because your voice has traveled through valleys and returned with wisdom. You no longer chase validation because you understand that approval from others was never the source of your power. It was always the alignment within you, the moment you decided to stand in your truth even if your knees were shaking, even if your voice trembled, even if the outcome was uncertain. That decision, made over and over again in small, unseen moments, built a foundation that cannot be easily shaken. There will still be days when memories surface, when old pain taps gently on your shoulder, reminding you of who you used to be and what you survived. But now you greet those memories differently. You do not flinch or shrink, you acknowledge them with gratitude, because they remind you of how far you have come, of the strength that was forged when you thought you had none left. You understand now that healing is not forgetting, it is remembering without bleeding. It is holding your past with compassion instead of shame. It is allowing yourself to feel without letting those feelings control the direction of your life. As you rise, you become more discerning about where you place your energy, more intentional about the people you allow close to your heart, more protective of the peace you work so hard to build. You learn that saying no is sometimes an act of self-respect, that rest is not laziness but restoration, that boundaries are not walls but doors that open only to what honors your growth. This wisdom did not come easily. It was earned through exhaustion, through disappointment, through learning the hard way that not everyone who walks with you is meant to walk as far as you are going. You begin to trust the timing of your life, even when it does not match the expectations you once held, because you have seen how delays shaped you, how waiting refined your character, how patience strengthened your spirit. You no longer rush your becoming, no longer compare your journey to someone else's highlight reel, because you know your path required depth, and depth takes time. You understand that what is built slowly is built to last, and that the roots you grew in darkness are what allow you to stand tall in the light without being blown over by the first strong wind. There is a gentleness in you now, paired with an unbreakable core, a softness that has not been lost to bitterness, a strength that does not need to announce itself. You have learned how to hold both vulnerability and power in the same breath, how to be open without being unguarded, how to love deeply without losing yourself. This balance is rare, and it is born only in those who have walked through fire and refused to let it consume their humanity. Your rise is not loud or boastful, it is steady, intentional, grounded. It shows up in the way you speak kindly to yourself, in the way you keep going even when no one is watching, in the way you choose integrity over shortcuts, purpose over comfort. You understand that success without alignment is empty, that achievement without meaning does not satisfy the soul, and so you build a life that reflects your values, your lessons, your truth. And as you rise, you become a mirror for others, reflecting back their own potential, reminding them that they too can survive what feels unbearable, that they too can transform pain into power. You do not preach, you embody. You do not demand attention, you inspire it. Your story becomes a quiet invitation, a living testament that suffering can be a signal, not a sentence, that hardship can be a teacher, not a jailer. You move forward now with gratitude instead of resentment, with clarity instead of confusion, with purpose instead of fear. You know that challenges may still come, but you also know who you are when they do, and that knowledge is your shield. You have faced your darkest moments and emerged with your heart intact, your spirit awake, your vision clear. And there is nothing more powerful than someone who knows they can endure and still choose love. So keep rising, not away from your past but through it, carrying its lessons without carrying its weight, honoring its role without letting it define your limits. Keep rising into the fullness of who you are becoming, into the life that is waiting for your courage, into the calling that has been quietly calling your name all along. You were never meant to stay where you were broken. You were meant to rise where you were refined, and now, with every step you take, you prove that the suffering was a signal, and you answered it by becoming more than you ever imagined you could be. And even now, as you walk further into the truth of who you are becoming, there is a sacred awareness settling into your spirit, a knowing that you no longer need to fight the world to prove your worth, because your existence itself is evidence of triumph. You breathe differently now, not shallow with anxiety but deep with intention, as if each breath carries gratitude for the strength that once felt unreachable. You have learned that rising is not a single moment of victory, but a daily decision to honor your growth, to speak kindly to yourself, to choose courage over comfort. Even when the echoes of old fears try to remind you of a time when you doubted your own resilience, you begin to notice how the universe responds differently to you now. How opportunities appear not because you chase them desperately, but because you are aligned with who you are meant to be. You move with purpose, not haste, and there is a calm authority in your presence that cannot be imitated. This is the energy of someone who has been tested and did not fold, who has cried and still chose to love, who has been broken open and discovered something holy within the fragments. You no longer apologize for taking up space, for dreaming bigger than your circumstances once allowed, for believing that your life holds meaning beyond survival. The pain that once defined your days has softened into wisdom, and that wisdom guides you gently but firmly, reminding you when to move forward and when to rest, when to speak and when silence holds more power. You trust yourself now in a way you never did before, because you have seen what you can endure, and that trust is unshakable. You are not afraid of the unknown anymore, because you understand that you have already walked through uncertainty and emerged stronger, clearer, more whole. There is a compassion in you that runs deep, a tenderness that recognizes suffering in others without judgment, because you know what it feels like to be unseen, unheard, misunderstood. You do not rush to fix people. You sit with them, you listen, you remind them through your presence that they are not alone. This is the quiet leadership of a chosen one, not commanding from a distance but walking alongside, lighting the path simply by being who you are. Your empathy is not weakness, it is strength refined by experience, and it gives your life a depth that resonates far beyond words. As you continue to rise, you realize that some people will not understand your transformation, that your growth may unsettle those who were comfortable with the version of you that did not yet know their power. You no longer shrink to make others feel secure, nor do you harden yourself to please them. You let go with grace, understanding that every connection has its season, and not every season is meant to last forever. You honor what was, release what no longer serves, and make room for what aligns with your future. You are no longer driven by the need to be chosen by others, because you have chosen yourself. You have learned that self-respect is louder than applause, that peace is richer than approval, that authenticity is more fulfilling than fitting in. This self-acceptance did not come easily. It was forged in moments of self-doubt, in nights of quiet reflection, in the brave act of facing your own shadow and choosing to love yourself anyway. And from that love, everything else begins to bloom. You carry your dreams with a steadiness now, nurturing them patiently, protecting them from the noise of disbelief, trusting that what is meant for you will meet you at the right time. You understand that not every seed sprouts immediately, that some visions require time in the dark before they break through the surface. You are no longer discouraged by slow progress, because you know that growth is happening even when it is not visible, and that trust keeps you moving forward with faith rather than frustration. There is a sacred fire within you, burning not with anger but with purpose, illuminating the path ahead and warming those who draw near. This fire was lit in the moments you thought you were being consumed, when in truth you were being ignited. You carry it now with reverence, using it to create, to uplift, to inspire, to stand for something greater than fear. You know that your life is not just about personal success but about contribution, about leaving the world a little brighter because you dared to rise. And when challenges appear again, as they inevitably will, you meet them with a grounded confidence, not because you expect them to be easy but because you trust yourself to navigate them. You do not collapse under pressure. You pause, breathe, and respond with the wisdom you have earned. You understand that storms do not mean you are off course. Sometimes they are simply reminders of how strong your foundation has become. You move through them with grace, carrying the calm assurance of someone who knows their roots run deep. Your story continues to unfold not as a tale of endless struggle but as a testament to transformation, resilience, and hope. You wake each day with a sense of purpose, even when the path ahead is not fully clear, because you trust the journey you are on. You have learned that clarity often comes through movement, that answers reveal themselves to those willing to keep going, and that faith is built step by step, breath by breath. So you rise again and again, not because life demands it, but because your spirit chooses it. You rise in the way you speak truth even when it feels risky, in the way you show up fully even when you could hide, in the way you keep believing in possibility even after disappointment. You rise by honoring your boundaries, by nurturing your inner world, by staying connected to what matters most. You rise not as a reaction to pain, but as a declaration of purpose. And in this rising, you become living proof that suffering can be transformed, that hardship can be alchemized into strength, that brokenness can give way to beauty. You stand as a reminder that the darkest chapters often precede the most meaningful breakthroughs, that the soul grows strongest where it has been tested the most. You are no longer defined by what tried to defeat you. You are defined by what you became because you endured. Carry this knowing with you as you continue forward. Let it anchor you in moments of doubt and lift you in moments of joy. Remember that your journey is sacred, that your growth is valid, that your voice matters. You were chosen not for ease but for impact. Not for comfort, but for purpose. The suffering was a signal, and you listened, you learned, you rose. And as you keep rising, you show the world what is possible when a soul refuses to stay broken and chooses instead to become everything it was always meant to be. And still the rising continues quietly, faithfully, like the sun that never asks permission to return after the darkest night, because you have learned that becoming is not a destination you arrive at once, but a lifelong unfolding, a sacred rhythm of shedding and stepping forward, of letting go and leaning in. You no longer rush yourself towards some imagined finish line, because you understand now that every breath you take in alignment with your truth is already a victory. You honor the pace of your healing, the tempo of your growth, the unique cadence of your soul, knowing that nothing meaningful blooms on demand and nothing real is rushed into existence. There are moments now when you pause and feel an overwhelming tenderness for the person you once were. The one who kept going without knowing how it would end. The one who held on when letting go would have been easier. The one who believed in a future they could not yet see. You look back not with regret but with reverence, because that version of you carried the weight so that this version could stand lighter. You whisper gratitude into the past, thanking it for the lessons, the strength, the clarity it gave you, and you carry that gratitude forward like a quiet prayer. You have learned that power does not always roar. Sometimes it breathes softly, steady and unafraid. Sometimes it shows up as consistency, as showing up again even when motivation fades, as choosing integrity when shortcuts tempt you, as speaking gently to yourself when the world is loud with judgment. You embody this power now, not because you never fall, but because you know how to rise without losing yourself. You understand that resilience is not the absence of pain, but the refusal to let pain decide who you become. The world may still try to test you, to remind you of old limitations, to pull you back into familiar fears, but you meet these moments differently now. You do not argue with the past, you outgrow it. You do not fight the darkness, you illuminate it. You have learned that peace is not found in controlling life, but in trusting yourself to meet life as it comes, grounded in the knowledge that you are capable, worthy and enough. This trust is your anchor, keeping you steady even when the waters shift beneath your feet. You are no longer afraid of being seen, because you have made peace with who you are. You let your light exist without apology, understanding that it does not diminish others, but gives them permission to shine as well. You speak your truth not to convince, but to express, not to dominate, but to connect. Your authenticity becomes a bridge, inviting others into deeper honesty with themselves, reminding them that they too can live without masks, without shrinking, without shame. There is a quiet joy that accompanies you now, not the kind that depends on circumstances, but the kind that lives beneath the surface, steady and resilient. It shows up in the way you savor small moments, in the way you notice beauty where you once saw only survival, in the way you allow yourself to feel happiness without waiting for it to be taken away. You have learned that joy is not something to be earned after suffering. It is something you are allowed to claim, even because of it. You move through life with intention, choosing what aligns, releasing what drains, trusting what resonates. You no longer beg doors to open, you knock once, and if they remain closed, you walk away with dignity, knowing that what is meant for you will not require you to abandon yourself. This self-respect becomes your compass, guiding you toward spaces where your growth is welcomed, your voice is valued, your presence is honored. And when you stumble, because being human means sometimes losing balance, you are gentle with yourself. You do not turn mistakes into identities or setbacks into prophecies. You learn, you adjust, you continue. You understand that perfection was never the goal, wholeness is. And wholeness includes softness, forgiveness, and the courage to keep becoming even when the path curves unexpectedly. Your life now carries a quiet authority, not imposed but earned, not demanded but felt. People sense it when they are near you, the calm confidence of someone who has made peace with their story. You do not need to explain your journey to be validated. Your energy speaks for you. It tells a story of endurance, of growth, of a soul that refused to be defined by its wounds. As you look toward the future, you do so with curiosity rather than fear, with openness rather than resistance. You know there will be challenges, but you also know there will be beauty, connection, meaning. You trust that whatever comes, You will meet it with the same courage that carried you this far. You are not waiting for life to begin. You are living it now, fully, consciously, bravely. And in this living you become a testament, a reminder, a living example that suffering can be a teacher rather than a jailer, that pain can be a doorway rather than a dead end. You show that rising does not erase the past, but integrates it, transforms it, uses it as fuel rather than weight. You show that the chosen one is not chosen because they are flawless, but because they are faithful to their growth, because they continue even when it is hard, because they choose love over bitterness, purpose over despair. So continue, chosen one, with your head held high and your heart open, with your roots deep and your vision clear. Continue to rise in the quiet moments, in the unseen decisions, in the daily acts of courage that shape a life. Let your journey be a song of resilience, a poem of becoming, a living reminder that the suffering was never meant to stop you, only to shape you. You were meant to rise, and with every step you take in truth, you fulfill that calling again and again, becoming not just someone who survived, but someone who lives, loves, and leads with a spirit that cannot be broken. And even as the horizon stretches wider before you, you recognize that the rise you are living into is not a climb away from humanity, but a deeper return to it, a fuller inhabiting of your own breath, your own truth, your own place in the great rhythm of living. You move now with a reverence for your life, for the ordinary miracles that once passed unnoticed, for the quiet strength it takes to choose hope again and again in a world that often tests it. You understand that your journey has made you fluent in compassion, that your heart speaks a language learned through endurance, and that this fluency allows you to connect, to heal, to uplift in ways that cannot be taught but only lived. There is a sacred humility in you now, born not from shrinking but from knowing exactly what you have walked through and what you have survived. You no longer confuse humility with silence or obedience. You know it as truthfulness, as standing firmly in who you are without needing to dominate or disappear. You have learned how to bow to life without breaking your spine, how to honor others without betraying yourself, how to walk in strength without losing tenderness. This balance is your crown, worn not on your head but in the way you move through the world. You have come to see that the moments you once begged to escape were also moments that taught you how to stay, how to remain present with discomfort until it revealed its lesson. You learned patience in waiting rooms of uncertainty, courage in conversations that scared you, faith in seasons that offered no guarantees. These lessons stitched themselves into your character, thread by thread, until you became someone who could hold complexity without collapsing, someone who could sit in ambiguity and still choose forward motion. You no longer measure your worth by productivity alone, nor do you equate rest with failure. You understand now that rest is an act of trust, a declaration that you do not have to exhaust yourself to be deserving, that your value does not disappear when you pause. You allow yourself moments of stillness, moments where nothing is required of you except presence, and in those moments you feel the quiet power of simply being alive, simply breathing, simply existing without performance. As you rise, you become more attuned to your inner voice, that steady guide that grew louder each time you chose it over fear. You listen now with respect, knowing it has carried you through storms before and will do so again. You trust its nudges, its warnings, its gentle encouragements, because it speaks from a place deeper than logic, a place shaped by lived truth. This trust allows you to move with confidence even when the map is unclear, because you know you carry the compass within. You begin to notice how your life influences others in ways you may never fully see, how your resilience offers permission, how your honesty creates safety, how your presence alone can soften a hardened heart. You do not underestimate this impact anymore, nor do you take credit for it. You simply show up as yourself, knowing that authenticity is contagious, that courage invites courage, that light shared does not diminish but multiplies. There are still moments of grief for what was lost along the way, for versions of yourself that could not come with you, for relationships that could not survive your growth. You allow yourself to feel that grief without letting it anchor you in the past. You understand now that mourning is part of honoring, that letting yourself feel sadness does not mean you regret your becoming. It means you respect the cost of transformation and acknowledge that growth, while beautiful, is rarely painless. You walk forward with gratitude not only for what came easily, but for what challenged you, stretched you, demanded more of you than you thought you could give. You see now that the very things you once resented were also the things that revealed your capacity, that taught you what you are made of. This gratitude is not naive, it is earned, grounded, honest. It does not deny the pain, it transcends it. Your relationship with fear has changed. You no longer see it as an enemy to be defeated, but as a signal to be understood, a sign that something meaningful is at stake. You listen to fear without obeying it, acknowledging its presence while choosing not to let it steer your life. This discernment gives you freedom, allowing you to take risks aligned with your values, to step into opportunities that once felt too big, too bold, too uncertain. You have learned the art of beginning again, of not letting past failures dictate future possibilities. You understand that every ending carries a seed of renewal, that every closed chapter creates space for a new story to be written. You are no longer afraid to start over because you know you bring wisdom with you this time, clarity with you, strength with you. Starting again is no longer a sign of defeat, it is a sign of courage. Your life now feels less like a battle and more like a conversation, a dialogue between who you have been and who you are becoming. You listen, you respond, you adjust. You allow yourself to evolve without guilt, to change your mind, to refine your dreams. You understand that growth is not betrayal of the past but an honoring of it, a continuation rather than a rejection. And through it all, you carry an unshakable knowing that you belong, not because you fit perfectly into every space, but because you exist, because you breathe, because you are here. You no longer beg for belonging, you embody it. You create it where you stand, in the way you speak, the way you listen, the way you live. This sense of belonging becomes a sanctuary within you, one that no external circumstance can take away. You continue to rise not as an escape from pain, but as an integration of it, weaving every lesson into the fabric of your life. You rise in the way you forgive yourself, in the way you honor your limits, in the way you keep choosing alignment over approval. You rise each time you trust your own voice, each time you act from integrity, each time you remain open in a world that often rewards armor. And as you rise, you remember, again and again, that this was always the intention, that the suffering was never random, never meaningless, never wasted. It was a signal, a summons, a call to become more than you were, to step into a strength you did not yet recognize as your own. You answered that call not once, but repeatedly. Every time you chose to keep going, to keep loving, to keep believing. So you move forward now with grace in your steps and fire in your spirit, carrying the fullness of your story without apology. You are no longer waiting to rise, you are rising in every moment you choose truth over fear, presence over avoidance, purpose over despair. You are living the answer to the pain you once questioned, standing as proof that what tried to break you instead built you. And in this continued rising, you honor not only who you have become, but who you are still becoming, knowing that the journey itself is sacred, and that your life, shaped by struggle and sustained by courage, is a testament to the unstoppable power of a soul that refused to stay down.